Members, right, we need to get on. It's 9:15. We're on agenda item 94 on page 149, which is Jordan's Lane Swallowfield. I will let the officer, Rebecca Walkie, explain why this is a committee, but the recommendation is to allow Hampshire County Council to determine the application.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll just explain briefly why Public Rights of Way have come to the Planning Committee, and it is in the Constitution in section 8.1.1. The Planning Committee will carry out functions relating to town and country planning, highways and public rights of way as specified in Schedule 1 of the Local Authorities Functions and Responsibilities Regulations 2000, and therein I can supply you with a list of those regulations if you would like them. And one of those regulations is to keep the definitive map and statement under review, which is our first item, which is Jordan's Lane. And this application is being triggered by the fact that the definitive map and statement is going to close in 2026, and an application has come in from the British Horse Society for part of the way A to B to be a byway, and from B, C to D to be a restricted byway, and part of that, or most of it, is in Hampshire. And that's made under section 53 of the Borough Countryside Act. Hampshire are happy to determine the application, but we need permission from Wokingham to carry out the work, and that's what I'm asking members for today.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Any? None at all? All right. The recommendation then is on page 149 to give Hampshire County Council permission to determine it. So all those in favour, please show. That's unanimous on that one. So thank you. Right. Next one then, agenda item 95 on page 155 is the footpath by the Harley Davidson showroom. Recommended that members agree to the modification. There we go.
Okay, I'm keeping these short, it's late, but this is for doing that diversion order that's made in 2014 for Alley 15, part of Alley 15. The owners have objected because the diversion order differs from the Section 106 agreement, and as a result I'm asking members to approve a modification to the diversion order, which is originally 3.5 metres between B and C, and reduce that to 2.5 metres.
Thank you. Right, we do have a speaker, Councillor Ken Mile from Maiden Early Ward.
Thank you very much, Chairman. No, I shouldn't take up more than about 20 minutes with this presentation. Bear with me. I can share. I'm only in one. I'm only 5. Oh, shocked and stunned.
This is going to take 20 minutes. Do you want a copy?
Oh, is it possible to card? I have it, so you do have notes of that. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes. We'll start now then, Ken.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Chairman, we had a... this has gone on for a little while, this particular one. It appeared first in about 2013 when Harley Davidson garage was going to be opened, and I was quite excited because we actually got the path sorted, and it looked like in 2014 the deed agreement was signed. All looked very good. Appendix 2 stated movement of the fence across, so we had a nice wide path. The public diversion order originally said point A was 5.5, B 3.5, C 3.5, and don't like this microphone. 3.5. HDG decided they weren't going to increase the path size despite numerous contacts that we made with them, and I was rather disappointed when it was decided that this wouldn't be followed through with any legal action or request. I was notified that in November, I think it was, the S106 agreement was contradicted the diversion order. And in October they had the legal agreed to a half-metre reduction. And January councillors held meetings with the officers to try and get our heads around what was happening. I'm quite surprised because at some point I received an email, which I've got a copy of here, which said that the highway rules would not change, even though they weren't going to move the fence and they were going to restrict the path to 2.5. The highway rules would apply forever on that particular place. But then I saw this diversion order come through. Now, this diversion order is quite clearly knocking a metre off the whole path all the way down. I know of 2 people that have fallen down the bank there, and luckily they're quite young and they've laughed it off, so it's not been reported as accidents as such. What went wrong? Why has this suddenly happened? I've got a couple of questions at the end. I mean, we've got land erosion as well to worry about on the banks going down, because that's going to catch us out in about 5 to 10 years' time, I'm sure. Why do we allow companies to dictate to us that they can just decide not to fulfil what they've signed up to, what they've agreed to? I mean, surely that legally just doesn't stand in anyone's book. Maybe there's a mitigating circumstances, I don't know. If there was going to be no change to the dedicated highway, why are we doing this diversion order now to replace one that currently exists? And that's it. Thank you very much, Chairman, and members and officers.
Thank you very much, Ken. Right, I've picked up a couple of points from that, being the comment on the land erosion. I don't think it's a planning reason, is the other one about making someone do what we already agreed to. If you didn't have a comment on it, I wouldn't stop you. And why are we doing it now, the diversion?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, Ken's right. We have had to renege on the original diversion order because of a mistake, an error in the Section 106 agreement. And that's unfortunate by one word, that we've had to go to 2.5 metres. However, we will have a path of 2.5 metres, which is good according to Sustrans standards for cyclists and walkers. Previously, the original historic path was 1.5 metres, so that's a bonus. We will have a path in place, a highway. Before there was just a common law path by the side of the garage, so this gives it legal weight, gives it legal status. We're also removing the risk that we could be prosecuted under Section 130 of the Highways Act because we're not asserting or protecting the rights of those people to use the existing right-of-way, and that removes that risk to the authority. Holydayson, the company, have also given us £10,000 towards improvements for the step and slope at the end of the path. And also this section will become part of the long distance path, which will stretch from the Blackwater Valley to Thames Path in Wargrave. So it's part of a long distance route and very important. So I think there's lots of benefits to the residents of Burnley to establish this path, and it will be established as highway if you want to approve the modification tonight. Regarding the bank erosion, I've talked to our engineers, and they are saying there's no signs of settlement. The existing footpath above the embankment is in good condition with straight and true surfacing, and that allows us to fence at the top of the embankment.
Okay, we have 2 board members here, so I'll let Rochelle go first. It's Winnish.
Yes, okay. Can we actually have a fence there? Because Ken has mentioned that people have fallen down there. I'd rather not have older people or younger people fall down a bank if they can avoid it.
No, definitely, that would be one of the things we'd put in place is a fence, concrete post fence and rail fence, so to make it safer, as you say.
And can we make absolutely sure that we don't make the same mistake twice with the embankments and with the fact of the whatever the wording was in the S106 agreement that didn't work?
Of course, the learning curve for all officers involved, yeah.
and I'm the other ward member because it's in Hawkton, and yes, I do use that path on a regular time to go to the pub. And I was not one of them. I was not one of those that fell down.
Yes, and he's got to fell down.
There has been a fence along by the river for a very long time now. It's a wooden fence, but due to the bank erosion, it does collapse on a regular basis. I have to say I do support what Councillor Ken Mile has been saying. John?
Just one question, Rebecca. Why they've signed this? I assume they were in their right mind when they signed this. And it's sealed. And why have they changed their mind?
It's a change of mind. Because they originally agreed to the full width, and then they changed the solicitor, and the new solicitor objected, and that's when the new agreement was signed. So there was probably a change of heart halfway through the negotiations on that.
I'm just a bit concerned that we have a signed document which is sealed with solicitor's signature, we've all spent money on, and they just seem to want to change their mind. I understand there may have been a mistake in the S106, but what would be the chances if this went to law? What would be the chances? Sorry, what would be the chances of us winning this? Because this may not, there may be a problem with the S106, but they've signed the air intention here.
Mary, did you want to?
Okay, isn't it the case that agreement reflects what's going to happen? It's 2.5 metres in the agreement, is that right? Yes. So actually, what happened? Is that the wrong? Oh, it says 3.5. Sorry.
That's what I can't
Tell me about the 2.5.
I think actually I just got confused because as you say, John, they signed up to the 3.5, and then in the section 106 came in later, and it's 2.5. So that it's a misunderstanding about land ownership within the 106. But your question is, what would happen if we don't agree to the modification and we take it to the Secretary of State? Because that's where it would have to go. We've got an objection in. And if we say, well, we want 3.5, the Secretary of State is going to look at the 106 agreement, which both parties have signed up to, and we really are on an unsure footing, which would mean that they were very unlikely, the inspector is very, very unlikely to agree the 3.5 set out in the original diversion order, because we subsequently signed the 106 order. And of course it would cost us going through an inquiry several £1,000s to get that decision, and as I say, it's unlikely. So the inspector then would have a choice to give us 2.5, which is what we were originally asking for. The other option is to abandon this order and make another order, but again it would be for 2.5 on 3.5.
So they can't make it any smaller. Sorry. They can't make it any smaller. It would cost us money, is what you're saying, basically.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members wanting to pass comment? Nothing at all.
I think we should be guided by Mary.
Oh no, sorry.
One last comment then, Mary.
No, I'd better not say anything because I think I've perhaps misunderstood the Section 106 agreement after speaking to Catherine Woodward, who's the highways lawyer. But that's all correct, what you said, of course, yes. I thought it was also alongside another existing footpath, is that right?
Yes. There's a common law path as well, just to confuse things, which is being used, as Ken rightly says, but it has no, it isn't on the definitive map, so it has no legal status, whereas this modification, this diversion, will give that common law path legal status and put it on the map and make it part of the Wokingham Hunterson's path.
Okay. So, being one of the ward members and the person that uses this path, from what I've heard from the officers and members, the path, the width that it is very usable by the people that want to use it, and it is acceptable. And what we've heard, trying to get that extra bit, we are, yeah. So, we're going to have to go to the vote on it, whether to pass it or not. It's down there on page 155. It's recommended that we do.
Can I just say, Chairman, sorry. As a council, we're under all sorts of financial pressures. Every document I see coming from the council says we've got to find £20 million over the next 5 years or 3 years. But and I just don't think it's a good way to spend the money, because if we just spend the money and end up with what we've got now, it's disappointing that we've got the wrong 106, and that needs to be addressed. But I would have to support the officer's recommendation.
Very good summing up there, John. Thank you. Right, members, all those in favour, please show. Okay, and those against. Myself. So obviously it's passed. Right. And we come to the last application then, Borough 96, which is Tangill level crossing, and its recommendation that members authorise the railway crossing diversion.
Thank you, Chair. This is a simple diversion order under section 119A of the Highways Act 1980 for diversion alternative route over a level crossing, so over a temporary bridge. National Network Rail have carried out an audit of the crossing and found it to be dangerous, having a C3 rating. And this is based, I'm told, on a mathematical model based on collective risk and individual risk. And it ranges from a collective risk of 1 as high and 13 as low, and ours comes in at 3, and an individual risk of from A to M, and ours comes in at C. So therefore, C3 is a high risk of someone getting injured at this crossing. So currently it has a temporary closure on the actual crossing, and the bridge is being used.
Right, we have one speaker registered, which is Damien Minus from Network Rail. Sorry you've kept waiting so long.
I'll be as brief as possible. Good evening. That's it. I'll speak on behalf of the applicant, which is Network Rail. Tanner House is a footpath level crossing which lies on an electrified bi-directional railway line used by some 180 trains a day travelling at a line speed of 70 miles an hour. The key safety concern associated with it is insufficient sighting distance and the frequency and type of pedestrian use. Due to considerable and irremovable sighting restrictions in both directions, the crossing, if reopened, would give the members of public using it insufficient time to traverse the length of the crossing in relative safety. As regards the user of the crossing, a 9-day census recorded a high number of 132 pedestrian crossing a day, which included vulnerable users. For the purposes of risk assessing our infrastructure, vulnerable users are not only those mobility impaired, frail or infirm, but also those using mobile devices or wearing headphones, which may and often do severely affect one's ability to interact with their surroundings and to perceive and act upon warning signs like sound of an approaching train or the train sounding its horn. The crossing is a popular communal link. It is also reportedly frequently used by unaccompanied children and is subject to a considerable number of recorded and reported instances of trespass and misuse. We do not dispute that the crossing, if used correctly by a fully mobile and sensible adult adhering to the injunction to stop, look and listen, would not present a significant risk of harm. Unfortunately, not all adults, especially those misusing or trespassing, and perhaps even fewer children, are fully mobile or sensible, and their safety must be considered as well. We use a complex quantitative and narrative risk assessment process to assess the risk associated with the crossings. The quantitative component is the mathematical model referred to earlier, which is Alcrum, and is supported by the narrative risk assessment, and taken jointly, both of these measures form a comprehensive and reliable risk assessment model. Using this system, 10 House or 10 Hill, if reopened, would rank 3rd highest on the Wessex route. With regards to the temporary bridge, irrespective of its aesthetics, we consider it a major improvement to the safety of the public path network and to the safety of members of public using it. It is our aspiration, as this committee knows, to work jointly with Wokingham Borough Council to provide a permanent solution, an accessible one at that point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have a board member then, Chris.
This is clearly a very important safety matter, so no hesitation in urging members to support Network Rail's application.
Okay, Michelle.
I just wanted to ask to have disabled access on the temporary bridge as well as the permanent bridge, because disability people will have to get across the place there anyway.
Can you agree that?
Yes. So the crossing in its original form was not accessible, and in exercising our duty under Section 149 of the Equality Act, we have to take into account mobility impaired use, and we carry out a diversity impact assessment. Since the crossing had never been accessible, it has been established that provision of a stepped access would be sufficient. However, in the course of our interaction with Wokingham Borough Council, it transpired that there was a larger development plan on the adjacent land to take place in from 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And it was proposed that a temporary solution would be installed, which at a future date is intended to be replaced by a permanent and accessible structure to be funded jointly by Network Rail and Wokingham. Thank you.
Chris, do you want to add anything?
I was only going to mention the car park that's currently being built down on Carnival Pool. That's currently part of the discussions we're having at Rail, potentially linking it into the car park to make use of the lifts and the stairwell that currently are being constructed. So it'll be a replacement of potentially the two that span both railway lines from this side right to the other to prevent them from up and down over 2 sets of bridges.
Two fairly simple questions. One is this supposedly temporary bridge. How temporary is temporary? How long is it going to have to last there, or will it be taken down when the other one is built?
It's finished.
We wanted to replace as soon as possible. It is subject to repeated instances of vandalism. We also, due to its temporary status, have to incur significant cost in regular inspections and repairs. So maintenance is much heavier on Network Rail than it would be with a permanent structure. I think it's fair to say that it is our aspiration to have the structure replaced. Sorry, let me rephrase. To have the structure, the temporary structure in situ until 2019.
Yeah.
It's the longest period. And we are currently in discussions with Wokingham about provision of the permanent structure.
And the second part was, it's a rating of C3, which is considered high risk. What will it become? Is it the C1 low rating or minimum risk?
If closed.
Yes, when you made this new change.
It will become M13,
which is high rating safety.
It is negligible because it's M on the scale of A to M, M being the lowest, and 13 on a scale of 1 to 13, 13 being the lowest.
Okay.
But did you have anything you wanted to add to any of those questions?
Yep, thank you, Chair. The funding for it is on the SIL list, I believe, so hopefully we want to progress it as soon as possible.
Is that it then, members? All right then. So I was on page 161 then, the recommendation that members authorise officers to make a railway crossing diversion order. So all those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous for that one. Thank you very much. Right, last item on the agenda. Members, we haven't finished. The agenda still live and camera rolling. page 167 is the quarterly enforcement. I don't propose to say anything about it, but if there are questions, then Justin will answer them. Members, are there any questions? None at all? Well, that was the... Oh, do we need to do the... That's it. Right, that was the last item on the agenda, so I close the meeting. Thank you.